Hello everyone and welcome back to Speaking Spurs with me, Kieran, talking all things Tottenham where the circus continues. Things just keep going from bad to worse for Tottenham, don't they? Fabio Paratici situation has become much worse, and on top of that the injuries continue to mount. So we'll start off talking about Fabio Paratici because the news broke today. I'm sure many of you have already heard about it, but we're going to talk about it anyway and the impact it has. If we start with my views before I go into the statement. So, Paratici, since he's come into the club, has he been a success or not? In one sense, he hasn't. In another, he has. In terms of, let's say, working with Conte. So, he was brought in. He wanted Conte originally to be manager. Conte didn't want to come to Spurs, which is why we ended up with Nuno, which was Paratici's other choice after showing the attacking footage of his Valencia team, not the Wolves team. So he was brought in. So in that sense, not a great appointment. The signings he made, a good appointment. But when Conte, we finally got him, I think Levy's thinking was they've worked together before at Juventus. But probably didn't understand their relationship fully. So it seems like since Conte has been at the club, Paratici has been a bit of a Levy puppet at times as well. But Paratici also has been thinking about the future of the club with some of the signings of the youngsters that we know Conte didn't particularly want to play. Hence why Spence went out on loan. Udogie or Udogie, however you pronounce his name, stayed on loan at his club. And Pat Matassar also stayed on loan in his first season with the club that we bought him for. So in terms of building players for the future, I think he's done quite well. Players that have been brought in permanently, I also think he's done fairly well. It's been good business. The squad has been upgraded. Things just haven't clicked for certain players. Maybe it's because of Conte's system and things like that. We're hearing reports about Conte's mad training sessions, forcing players to run 2 kilometres, which although is not a long distance, probably the intensity requires them to run out the 2 kilometres on match day probably hasn't helped, and apparently his training became quite repetitive and sour. But I think in terms of the relationship between Paratici and Conte, I don't think it works properly. Conte probably just wanted certain players through the door, wasn't worried about the youngsters coming in for the future because he's not a project manager. And then Paratici obviously went out and got those instead, and then that takes up some of the budget for the more experienced players that Conte wants to bring in. So it was a bit of a compromise. So I think Paratici actually has been good for the club from a transfer sense. But the issue is he is our director of football that can no longer take part in football decisions that involve transfers. But if we just have a look at the players that he has signed for us, we'll start with the recent ones and sort of work our way back. So Clement Longley came in on loan. Good pedigree, Barcelona player. A player that's in and out of form, probably thought that he could maybe turn things around with regular game time at Spurs. He's been okay. He's pretty much been like a bit like Ben Davies. They've been fine on rotation. They've both done an okay job. Don't set the world alight, but they've been steady. Fraser Forster, I think, brilliant free transfer. A lot of people were underwhelmed by that when he came in, but actually he's been very good as a backup for Hugo Lloris. Some might say he's been our best player recently. Probably the best signing we actually made in the end. Perisic came in on a free. Obviously great pedigree of a player. Started off fairly well at Spurs. Hasn't really been the same since the World Cup, but I think that's partly to do with Sessegnon being injured. Obviously playing twice a week is hard for him, as well as the training. I think with rotation it would have been better. Now we're at the stage of the season when we're in no competitions. He'll only be playing once a week, and I think that will help with his form. Twice a week hasn't worked, but overall added good experience to the squad, has probably helped Sessegnon behind the scenes, so in that aspect has been a good transfer, and it was free. Bazuma, 25 million he cost us. And it's one of them, tactically, it kind of just hasn't worked. He's obviously picked up the injury, needed time to bed into the Spurs squad and hasn't really had that chance. So I think we will see the best of Bazuma under a different manager. So that in itself is a fine bit of business because We all know what Bazuma can do. We saw him for Brighton, was one of the most sought-after midfielders, one of the best in the Premier League in the past few seasons. Richarlison, the 60 million price tag is probably the part where you think not a good transfer. If we'd have got him for a better price, I think it's a good transfer. The player in the club as a whole, I think he's a good player. I think we will see better out of him under other managers. He's aggressive. He loves being on the front foot. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's very, very emotional. As you can see, his frustration when he doesn't score, every time he gets injured. So I feel like he's just been a bit unlucky. Jed Spence, 12.5 million paid with the possibility to rise to 20 million. He's a good one for the future. We saw what he did in the Championship, had a hell of a season. So he's been up and down since he's been out on loan. Had a great game up against Kylian Mbappe. But yeah, maybe that up and down form is why Conte decided to let him go out on loan, because he's not ready to be consistent in the Premier League. Udogie, 16 million. He's performing really well still. His development is great. I think he's going to be a fantastic addition to the squad. So another one for the future. Kulusevski at the moment is only on loan. Conte going, people may have thought was a bit of a worry. Is he now going to want to sign for Spurs? But things that have been said from him indicate that he very much wants to turn that deal permanent. So again, he's still young. Great one for the future. Bentancur, 17.1 million, absolute snippet. Unlucky with his injury, but I think he's classy. He's been one of our best players since he came in at the club. Galini, the goalkeeper that came in on loan, it's hard to say whether he was a good signing or not, because he just came in as a backup goalkeeper. He was meant to be Hugo's successor, but I think ultimately the guy just wanted regular game time. So, we'll call that one bad signing. Brian Hill, 22.5 million, fantastic youngster. And actually, just before he went back out on loan this season, he started playing quite well. He just needs to bulk up a little bit for the Premier League, but he's got all the attributes in his game to be like a little David Silva kind of player. So yeah, another one for the future. Christian Romero, still young, initially on loan, then turned permanent, has won a World Cup. He's got the feistiness. You take out the yellow and red cards out of his game, and you've got a world-class defender on your hands, so that's another great one, and still young. And then Emerson Royal, he's not particularly old, came in, really struggled because he was being played out of position. He's now started to adapt a little bit, hit a great bit of form, and unluckily for him, injured. 22.5 million, former Barcelona player, and back in the Brazil squad. So actually, when you look at the signings, they've not been bad. I think they've just struggled under Conte, and we might see better from them under another manager. So now let's talk about what has actually gone on with Paratici. So we knew when he came into the club there was this looming decision over the financial mismanagement at Juventus. We knew there was a chance this was going to happen, but I think Daniel Levy thought it was worth the risk, and probably thought that the ban was never actually going to affect him in the UK. So maybe it's an oversight from our legal department, haven't done our due diligence enough. But actually, with those, now looking at those players that have been brought in, maybe it wasn't too bad a risk, because we've got a good foundation for the future of a young crop of players there. And actually, apart from Perisic and Forster, we should get quite a few years out of the rest of these players that have been signed. But the downside is there's been a massive restructure at the club. There's been lots of new staff added into different elements of the club. So some of the jobs that maybe one person was doing before, there's 2 or 3 people doing. So there's been a lot of money spent in that aspect, a lot invested, a lot of a restructure. So unless, we don't know what's going to happen, but let's talk about the what has actually come out. So FIFA have extended Fabio Paratici's ban to worldwide activities. So in January, he was handed a 30-month ban for carrying out activities within the Italian Football Federation, part of an investigation into alleged financial mismanagement at Juventus, which saw 11 other officials banned and the club deducted 15 points. So the Italian FA then asked for these bans to be extended worldwide, and FIFA have now confirmed that it's granted the request, meaning a global ban from football activities for Paratici. So they said in a statement, FIFA have confirmed that the following a FIFA have confirmed that following a request by the Italian FA, the FIGC, the chairperson of FIFA Disciplinary Committee has decided to extend sanctions imposed by the FIGC on several football officials to have worldwide effect. So Sky Sports News, they contacted Tottenham and the Football Association for further guidance on what this means for Paratici and his role at Spurs. They're yet to hear officially back, but in a nutshell, what we think is going on is that Paratici cannot conduct any transfer market activity directly. He cannot talk to agents nor negotiate deals, and that's a fundamental part of his job as the manager and director of football. But he can work internally at Spurs, including attending meetings. So I have a feeling there will be some loopholes involved there that, we could have somebody sitting in a meeting with an agent and Paratici could be listening in, and there's no reason he couldn't be text messaging our representative who is talking to them. It's indirect, but hey, who knows? Or Paratici could be sitting, because what we saw during the Spurs documentary is when there's transfer dealings, as we saw in the documentary, a lot of it actually just takes place over the phone. They don't leave until the final stages. So there's no reason that one member of staff at Spurs could be on the phone to another club or an agent of a player having a conversation on loudspeaker. Paratici is then standing next to said Spurs man and telling them what to say back. So I think there's probably little loopholes around it. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one at the moment. So we're still waiting for official clarification of what this actually means, such as whether he can be involved in Tottenham's search for a new permanent manager, following the departure of Conte. So Paratici, Juventus and the other officials involved have appealed the sanctions, with the result of the appeal expected later in April maybe. The ban is in effect though, whilst the appeal to CONI, which is the Italian Olympic Committee, is going on. So the ban is in there regardless until the appeal has gone through either way. So Paratici and the 11 other former officials may also face a separate criminal case with a preliminary hearing that was due to take place yesterday, but that was actually postponed till the 10th of May. Juventus and the 12 officials, including Paratici, all deny any wrongdoing. Obviously, that seems what everybody does at the moment. Like Everton have now come out saying they haven't broken any financial fair play rules. Man City did the same thing a while ago. So on Tuesday, in an extended interview on the club's official website, Paratici described Conte's exit as the right decision and called on everyone at the club to focus on a successful end to the season. And what I actually think is hilarious about this is, since things have kind of ramped up about Paratici possibly facing a worldwide ban, the second that was announced, Paratici has been completely out of the public eye. He hasn't spoken publicly. Tottenham have kind of hidden him in the background, because when he first came to Tottenham and in Italy, he said that the directors of football, they talk to the media a lot. In England they don't, and the chairman don't really. It's just the manager. He becomes the face of the club, even though he's not the one making all the decisions, which Conte expressed that he found weird. So we saw Paratici in interviews and stuff. Then all of a sudden, the request got put in to ban him globally, and then boom, Tottenham completely hid him. So naively, they must have thought that there wasn't going to be a worldwide ban, because boom, they allow him to do an interview and then the following day he gets a worldwide ban. It's hilarious from Tottenham as PR. On top of that, the stupid decision to announce the departure of our manager on a Sunday evening at like 10:30 in the evening. Like, our PR team are absolutely useless. They get so much wrong, and it makes us look a joke. We are the joke of football. But anyway, fan group, the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, on Wednesday afternoon, they called for clarity and reassurance from the club. Responding to the Paratici ban, it tweeted, "This news adds further to the extremely concerning situation at the club. No manager, no director of football, and uncertainty around our star player and our end of season finish. Fans deserve to hear a clear statement of strategy from THFC so they can be reassured by the board on their plan to bring success and stability to the club." I mean, I think that's completely fair. Daniel Levy came out and gave a really brief statement about Conte leaving, nothing like the stuff that we got when Pochettino left and when Jose Mourinho left. So there was obviously a lot of love lost in that relationship towards the end. So what this means for Spurs, we don't actually know at the moment. Are we going to search for a new director of football? Are we going to scrap the idea of a director of football? I mean, it's going to be difficult because so many new roles have been created and put into place. To then scrap it, I think you have to scrap the majority of the system. Now, I know if we are going to bring Pochettino back, I don't think he likes working under a director of football. He very much likes to be the main man, to run things his way, which is absolutely fine. I prefer that. Or if they do find somebody, I think when you're bringing a manager in, you should ask them who they comfortably feel like they can work alongside. They should have an input in the person that's gonna be running things for them to make sure they can form a decent relationship, be on the same page, and things will work better. But yeah, absolutely hilarious. So now let's move on to the next part, which is the squad situation. Our injury crisis is just coming at the wrong time. Obviously, we knew that Bentancur, Bazuma, Sessegnon, Hugo Lloris, they all had those injuries. Then Ben Davies got injured against Southampton. Richarlison got injured there. And then Emerson Royal finally gets called up to the Brazil squad. He gets injured. And then there are reports that apparently Porro got a slight injury in Spain's game, which is really, really annoying because somehow we've gone from having 4 right wing backs to potentially none. I mean, we're down to Porro. I don't think his is going to be an injury that's going to keep him out for any time at all, really. But, you know, Jed Spence has gone out on loan. Matt Doherty, we allowed to have his contract terminated. Emerson Royal injured, and then, Porro, a brand new person that, yes, he's feeling his way in, has now got to play every single game. And if he gets injured, we're screwed. So let's talk about the injuries. So Yves Bissouma, he's is still in recovery from ankle surgery. No further update yet given on when he could return. It is feared, though, he may struggle to play again this season at all, and I think a lot of us have just accepted that's not going to happen. Spurs actually said at the time, we can confirm that Yves Bissouma is to undergo surgery to repair a stress fracture to his left ankle. A time frame for his return will be determined after surgery. He will begin rehabilitation with our medical staff as soon as possible. So we know Bazuma out for the rest of the season, fine. Ryan Sessegnon is obviously been injured for a while. The hamstring injury continues to keep him on the sidelines. It was picked up in mid-February, and it was expected to keep him out for 6 weeks. That time frame would suggest that he's not too far away at all from a return. But speaking ahead of the Southampton match, Conte confirmed that Sessegnon wouldn't be ready to feature straight after the international break. So he's probably still a couple of weeks away. It's believed that the 22-year-old has been doing plenty of gym work while his teammates have been away and could make the comeback soon. So that might help relieve a bit of pressure on Ivan Perisic. Then Bentancur, the biggest miss so far this season. We know he's out for the rest of the season as he continues to recover from the ACL injury suffered against Leicester in February. He's been sharing images of his rehab process on social media. And he is actually expected to miss the start of next season with a September date being eyed. So on his social media, if anyone has seen recently, and even on Spurs', there was a picture of him in the gym doing some leg work. And he had, so one leg was strapped up doing the leg work and the other one he was resting with his crutch. Big miss, classy midfielder. So then Hugo Lloris, we know, was injured, but he actually made his return to action during the international break as he played 45 minutes against Ipswich in a behind closed doors friendly. So he was out since picking up the knee injury that he sustained against Manchester City at the start of February, but will be pushing for a first team return either against Everton or, should that come too soon, against Brighton. So what he said was, it was good to be back on the pitch, to have that reference. Obviously, it's been a long injury, but step by step, I'm closer to a return. I'll keep working, and I'd like to thank all the staff for their help. So, should come back in. I feel a bit sorry for Fraser Forster because I think he's been excellent since Hugo Lloris has been out. So then in the Southampton game, the injuries that then marred us in that game. The first one, Richarlison had to pull out of the Brazil squad after limping off in tears after just a few minutes of the 3-3 draw to Southampton just before the international break. It was feared the calf injury could lead to a lengthy layoff for the forward. We thought initially he could be 6 weeks. However, we understand that he avoided serious injury and is not expected to be out for long at all. While the trip to Everton on Monday night is probably going to come too soon, he should be fit to return against Brighton on April the 8th. So that's good news there. Then Ben Davies was the other man, expected to be out between 4 and 6 weeks after suffering a hamstring injury that forced him off against Southampton. He will almost certainly miss the entirety of April, but could do well to return for the last couple of games of the season. We host Brentford on May the 20th before travelling to Leeds a week later on the final day of the campaign. The annoying thing about this is Ben Davies has been very reliable this season. Hasn't set the world alight, but he's done his job. He's been solid. At least a 7 out of 10 in every game. And then surprisingly, when he had to cover at left wing back, has been very good. He's done exactly what we needed him to do. And he's actually played well alongside Clement Longley because he's been playing left centre back pretty much all season. He has the knowledge to know when to come inside and help out. So again, another big miss. And then to make things worse, Emerson Royal has worked so hard, finally got his international call-up, and then gets his injury for Brazil. So it remains uncertain whether he will play again this season, with the defender requiring surgery on a meniscus injury picked up while in international duty. So it's set to keep him out for at least 6 weeks, meaning the Brazilian could potentially feature before the end of the campaign, but with surgery, you never know how long the rehabilitation is going to take. So, in a nutshell, Spurs is an absolute mess. Somehow still in the top 4. We have a coach as our manager, with Ryan Mason as our assistant manager. Our director of football can no longer take part in footballing decisions that happen outside of the club. And we have an injury list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 first teamers, with actually, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those became injured in February. Ay caramba, only at Spurs. Only at Spurs could this happen. It's an absolute mess. The board have got a lot to answer for. Daniel Levy needs to be a lot more public now and actually speak. I know he doesn't like to. I know he's a timid man. As a businessman, he's absolutely fantastic. As a football man, not great. Spurs has been on a steady incline for years, and then we kind of hit a point and we've plateaued, went back a little bit. Conte got us back up into that 4th spot after a few years away from European football. And now we're back in a complete mess again. So it's a real frustrating one. A hard one to take. There was the possibility this was always going to happen with Paratici, but the injuries coming in the way they are, it's just made it very frustrating. And if we do finish in the top 4 this season, we've done a hell of a job. And Stellini and Ryan Mason can take a lot of credit if they get us over the line. Now, with regards to the Stellini, is there a chance he can put himself in contention for the Spurs job permanently? Probably not. So Spurs have been very honest with him and basically said, look, you are here to steady the ship through to the end of the season. That's pretty much it. If we go on a run and say it's unlikely that it will happen, but say we were to win all 10 games from now till the end of the season, especially with these injuries and probably only 2 of them likely to return before the end of the season, I think then he has a case to at least be spoken to. But I don't think it will happen. They really need to work hard to get it right. Rumours are now starting to emerge that Pochettino hasn't actually been spoken to yet. Now, from a conversation that I had with Ali Gold a while ago, when we met each other out shopping, he was saying to me that there is a few members on the board that are not keen on a Pochettino return and would potentially walk out of the club if he was to come back in. So I don't know really what went on behind the scenes with the whole Pochettino leaving. We all thought it was just because of the downturn of form and Mourinho was available and Daniel Levy panicked and just tried to get him in. But there must be more. there must be more there. I know Pochettino was quite open in his interviews towards the end, essentially moaning that he's just a coach, not a manager. Basically said that the club was signing players that he wasn't asking for without actually saying the words. So I'm sure he ruffled a few feathers. Most managers do. Nagelsmann is still our number one target. De Zerbi, by the looks of it, is number two. He has got a release clause and a package that can be met. But obviously that then incurs a lot of money. Conte's obviously had some kind of payoff. There's been an agreement there, so there can be no backlash with him suing us. Yeah. So we'll see. But De Zerbi's clause actually says that he can't be approached until the summer, which is fine. I think we've all conceded as fans that we're going to have Stellini and Mason until the end of the season, no matter what. But there isn't going to be any announcement, I don't think, of a manager until the season is completely done. Pochettino, I know, wants to review his situation. Nagelsmann does as well. But Nagelsmann is a man that we were linked with before, and it was said that before he took the Bayern Munich job, he did actually want to have a job in between, kind of to have a steady progression. So he's obviously been at Hoffenheim, Leipzig, and he wanted a club that was the next step, and Tottenham would have been that. But the problem was at the time we had managers in place, so it didn't happen. We took our chances with other managers. So he's kind of missed that step. But actually going to Bayern Munich and now having to come to Tottenham, if he does, let's say, he's experienced slightly smaller clubs than us, and he's experienced one of the biggest clubs in the world. So I feel like he'd be a more rounded manager, and if he was to come to us now, to him, he wanted to take that middle step. But for us, I think it's a bigger benefit that he's been at a club like Bayern Munich, and he will have had to have dealt with players with bigger egos than the ones we've got here at Tottenham. So, he seems like the man that most Spurs fans want as well. I think there's a massive, massive calling for him. That seems to be what I'm seeing everywhere. There's a few people that are still calling for Pochettino, and I think if we don't get Nagelsmann, most of us would be very happy with Pochettino, either or. De Zerbi, I think he's going to be the expensive option because of the release clause and stuff like that. And I think he'll be one of the harder ones to get away, because at Brighton, I think for him it's a good time to be managing them. But yeah, that's the situation at the moment. So the club is in an absolute mess. Nobody knows what's going on. And also, what manager is going to want to come into Spurs until they've got this cleared up? They're going to want to know the system they're working under. They're going to want to know who they're going to be working with. So Tottenham have got a lot to do within the next 10 games till the end of the season, on the pitch and off the pitch, to make sure they've got a club that is ready to propose to a new manager. So, yeah, thanks for sticking around for that one. Will be about half hour this video. So yeah, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being patient. Again, I apologise that there's nothing great to talk about, but this is the situation we're in at the moment. So thanks for sticking around. I have been Kieran from Speaking Spurs, and until next time, come on, you Spurs.